Hello everybody and welcome back to Spa for the concluding race of the weekend for the Radical Sprint Championship and the Radical Enduro Championship. It's a warm welcome from myself, Ben Evans. Alongside me is Will Brown from Radical. And Will, for the first time this weekend, the sun is peeking out.
Yes, and finally a fully dry circuit as well. So good 34-car grid here. Looking forward to a fast and furious final race here at Spa-Francorchamps.
And lining up in pole position is Tim Berryman. The grid's set by the finishing positions from the race we had earlier on today, except that Mike Cantillon, with personal commitments, has had to head home. So Berryman is on pole with Scott Mansell, the first of the Supersport cars alongside him. A big thumbs up from Scott Malvern. He lines up in third place, the car that he shares with Nick Jones. And then it is Jeremy Ferguson who is going to be starting in the number 46 car, again one of the Masters class Spiders, and this could be a golden opportunity for the Fergusons to snatch a surprise victory, Will.
Yeah, and I would think that Scott Malvern may well be fancying the chances as well there, having such a short sort of pit stop in comparison with Mansell. But yeah, after Jeremy, then we've got Ricardo Donner in the SR3 RSX, just ahead of Harry and Ed Cockle, who really struggled in the second race with a difficult tyre choice.
The grid continues. Paddy McLuhan from 15th. He was fantastic in race 2, winning the sprint championship component of it. Mark Crader has shown potential all weekend, and he lines up in 17th. And then Jaap Bartels, well, that car, I'm glad to see it's been repaired and refettled. And he and Stuart Mosley could surprise. Jesse Menzer, well, unfortunately in race 1, he was involved in the first corner incident. He sadly got his crashing out of the way before the start of race 2 and had a bit of a moment when he was caught out by very tricky conditions on the installation lap to the grid. But Jesse has been incredibly fast this weekend, and I wouldn't rule out, if he gets through the first lap safely, him coming through to take victory.
No, he's undoubtedly been the class of the field in terms of pace, a blistering time yesterday in qualifying. So he's going to be one of the drivers fighting his way back through the field, as I'm sure will be Jaap Bartels and Stuart Mosley.
This could be an absolutely fascinating race, because amongst the Supersport cars in the Enduro Championship, they've got the pit handicap time that we're going to be considering. Amongst the Masters cars, the quicker of the Masters cars are arguably towards the tail end of the field.
Of the 3 races we've had here this weekend, this is definitely the one that's going to see the most unpredictable result, because, as you say, there's drivers out of position. We've got some fairly hefty success penalties within the grid. So yeah, this is really going to be turned on its head, particularly through that mid phase when you'll see drivers out of position and battling their way through. Seems to have just been a brief.
It was Harry Cockle who was.
Bit of hesitation there from Cockle, just getting away off the line, but back on his way now, as is the rest of the field.
Another driver we should reference towards the back of the field as well is Jamie Constable. He spun away his chances in the wet-dry race earlier on. It was horrific conditions, and it was John Harrison who led Throw Rouge for the first time, who sadly rotated into the wall. And I fear that his car was not repairable with the people power and spare parts available, but hopefully we will see him next weekend in action at Brands Hatch, and certainly for the remaining Radical European Masters events at Monza and the circuit to Catalunya. So this is the opportunity for the drivers to just get a sense actually where the grip is on the dry track, because both of the races we've had this weekend have been interrupted by difficult weather for the Radicals. This is the first time that they've got a dry track and a weather forecast which suggests it's going to remain dry through to the flag.
Yeah, so they'll just be testing out the available grip, and really they'll get a very different feeling, because of course the tyres will react in a very different way now. Higher track temperature, not only the fact that it's dry, but of course the fact it's much warmer as well. The sunshine is sort of certainly breaking through the clouds now. It is certainly much warmer. So yeah, this is going to be a fast and furious race. We might even see some lap records tumble today.
We could. Well, and this is also the race where the drivers start to have the absolutely gigantic grin underneath the helmet, because there are a few finer pleasures in life, one could argue, than being at the wheel of one of these Radicals on a beautiful sunny afternoon with Spa-Francorchamps as your playground for the next 50 minutes. And that's what they've got ahead of them. It's a mandatory pit stop race that will come in the middle 20% of the race, so between 20 and 30 minutes into the race duration. The course, they're not allowed to pit until they've gone past the pit lane open board, and they're only infringing on being out of window if they go past the pit window closed board. And so in reality, we'll expect to see most of the pit stops between 28 and 18 minutes remaining in the race.
And if you compare our two sort of leading Enduro Championship protagonists here on the grid, Scott Malvern and Nick Jones will be stopping for 60 seconds. They'll be stationary. If you compare that with the 85 seconds of Scott Mansell, so although he had a considerable advantage this morning, Scott's going to see that reeled in, particularly if Malvern can keep the advantage on in the early stages of the race.
Except to say that we did see some absolutely phenomenal pace from Scott Mansell in the closing stages of the race earlier on today. As the field already begin to bunch up side by side as they head towards Blanchimont behind the pace car. It's a rolling start as ever in the Radical European Masters. Part of the other challenge for the drivers as well is going to be bursting from bright sunlight into these areas of shade.
Yeah, real contrast of light and shade there as you come around Blanchimont, one of the fastest corners on the circuit. As you hook around the hill, you're going to go from sunshine behind you into quite deep shade, and yeah, that's going to make it a real challenge. And then, of course, looping back up through Eau Rouge, you'll pretty much be driving straight into it.
The pace car about to peel off, and the third race of the weekend for the Radical Sprint and Radical Enduro Championships about to get underway. And it is going to be the red car of Tim Berryman who will have responsibility for pacing them through to the grid area. When the lights change on the gantry, we'll be going racing, which they do now, and away we go. And Berryman plants his right foot. Also, it's a good start from Ferguson as well, who looks to try and jump some of the super sports into La Source, and a great start from Harry Cockle, who leaps right the way around into third place. One or two of them in trouble further back. It's Jamie Constable who has tangled with Marcello Marattiotto. They're both back under speed as it's Berryman from Ferguson, then Scott Malvern, Scott Mansell and Harry Cockle as they climb out of Eau Rouge for the first time. Yeah,
great manoeuvre there by Jeremy to stay really right out on the outside of the circuit and take quite a late line into La Source, but that paid off to give into space and the drive down into Eau Rouge.
Also good progress in these early stages from Jaap Bartels as Mansell and Malvern run side by side into Les Combes. Scott Mansell looks to the outside of Scott Malvern and he might be able to sneak through. In fact, they both outbreak themselves, run wide through Les Combes. Somebody firing off into the tyre wall.
I think that's Martin Verity, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. Really high speed there and really had nowhere to go as he spun around backwards.
This is a frenetic stuff at the front of the Enduro Championship race, because we have got Scott Malvern just ahead of Harry Cockle, then Scott Mansell. They've got Steve Burgess and Ricardo Dona behind them. I make it Ben Dimmock, who is our leading Sprint Championship runner at the moment, with the departure, sadly, from the race of Martin Verity. And then Jaap Bartels up into something like 15th position midway through the first lap.
Yeah, so already he's using the power of that the RXC Spider to great advantage. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to dispatch the next couple of cars, I think, though, with Paddy McLuhan being amongst them. Although he's just run quite wide, that's not going to have helped.
Certainly won't have done. Now, did McLuhan gather it all up in time? Yes, he did. In fact, he might have just gained the place as well on Nikolai Hansen. Now, what about Jesse Menzer? Where is he? He was 23rd through the first sector. Better sense of it at the end of the lap. Plenty of side-by-side action, and that is Scott Mansell to the inside of Harry Cockle. Mansell wasting no time, immediately trying to re-challenge Scott Malvern as they head on the brakes into the bus stop chicane. Malvern knows he's coming, parks his car in the middle of the road, trying to create as few opportunities as possible. So Tim Berryman leads, and leads comfortably, in fact, from Jeremy Ferguson at the end of lap one, almost 5.3 seconds, the advantage for Berryman. It's then side by side for third between Malvern and Mansell. Malvern.
Once again, Mansell takes a look there around the outside, but Malvern's got the better line, and I'm just wondering if that's perhaps given Cockle's just tucked in behind, but for a second it looked like he was going to be able to sneak and get past Mansell there as well.
This is some of the best radical racing we've seen in the year so far. Absolutely brilliant wheel-to-wheel stuff as they climb out of Radion onto the Kemmel Straight and bursting back into sunlight. What does Scott Malvern do? He puts his car in the middle of the road and then just eases across, make sure there's no room to the inside for Scott Mansell. There's no room to the outside either for Mansell. He is unable to find a way past. Car of Martin Verity has moved out of the way already, and so no yellow flags. Through they come. This is great stuff between Malvern and Mansell.
Yeah, a fantastic demonstration of just how evenly paced these top runners in the Sprint Championship, in the Enduro Championship are. We just see a replay there. That's a little bit of contact there. Looks like Brian Cordell possibly outbraking himself, and some contact with Ron Fletcher.
It's a bit of a shame. Let's have another look at it. And also Maratayotto just about evading it. They all pick their way through. It's not really what you want to see, a static car on the way into the bus stop chicane. Now look at this from Jaap Bartels. He is already up into 8th place and now challenging Ricardo Dona. And Steve Burgess runs very wide just ahead of him. The yellow car there is Ben Dimmock. He leads the Sprint Championship battles.
Yeah, Simon Hulton in close contention as well. Again, Simon's narrowly missed out a few times. He's really been quite unlucky this weekend, but certainly has the pace to contend at the front end if it also comes together.
Meanwhile, the Malvern-Mansell battle has just opened out, and Jaap Bartels is taking no prisoners. I think he clearly feels that the moment at Razion in race 2 was a win that got away, and he is determined to make amends for it.
Yeah, that's right, and he's got Cockhill next to contend with. But all the while, Tim Berryman's able to continue unabated right out at the front, and he's just extended his lead again to 7.7 seconds.
Now, what is Berryman's advantage over Jaap Bartels? It's 12.2 seconds. Bartels the inside of Harry Cockhill. Cockhill knows that that's one of the Spider cars. He's not going to get caught in the Spider's web. As a result, leaves plenty of space. But what it does do is maybe cost Cockhill a little bit in the battle between Malvern and Mansell.
Just wondering, it looks like Mansell just dropped back a team a little bit there in that last sector, whether or not he's just taking some time to regroup. That following in the dirty air behind Malvern isn't going to help his tyres one bit. And, it looks like he's maybe just taken a few moments just to regroup and get some fresh air for his brakes. And now he's having a tow, seeing if he can follow through behind.
Well, that was very, very close, because we have Mansell to one side of the road, Malvern to the other, and Jaap Bartels somehow was able to pick a way through it.
You do sense then, I wonder if Scott Mansell maybe thought that he could get a tow from the Spider and use that to propel himself past Malvern.
I think Scott Mansell is not overly fond with his continued grandstand view.
Oh, and a big slide. Oh,
well, around goes Jaap Bartels coming out of the Bruxelles hairpin. He completes the 360 and keeps the engine running, well recovered. It just shows how hard he was pushing in those early stages. And he now drops back behind Ricardo Dona into 8th place and needs to do it all over again.
Big, very, very big tank slapper there, and he was lucky really to avoid any contact with the other two before. Just see a replay here. Steps out of line again, it almost corrects it, and then the ensuing grip spins him around once more.
I think part of the problem there was because the left-hander followed so quickly after the Bruxelles hairpin. If there had been a straight, he'd just been able to plant his right foot and accelerate. The problem was he had to slow the car down for the left-hander, and that's what undid the weight balance in the car for him. So a bit of a moment there for Jaap Bartels, provided he's not shot the tyres with that spin. I don't think it's going to take him too long to move up through the field. He's up into pursuit of Ricardo Dona. Goes around him without any drama. He might also fancy a pop at Steve Burgess on the brakes for the bus stop chicane. Maybe thinks slightly better of that one. So the order is Tim Berryman who leads, Jeremy Ferguson is second, Scott Malvern is third, and he's the leading Supersport and Enduro Championship runner. Scott Mansell is fourth, Harry Cockhill is fifth, Steve Burgess 6th, Jaap Bartels 7th, Ricardo Dona 8th, 9th is Ben Dimmock. He is the leading Sprint Championship runner.
Yeah, and he has now made the pass stick, so you see there, good pass on Burgess and on his way down to chase up to Cockhill once more. And there we go indeed, look at the power of that. That's a big, really clear indication of the speed differential between these two classes.
Yeah, those Spiders look like such good fun. As the challenge for Bartels is he's now 18 seconds back from Berryman. That spin cost him about 6-7 seconds, and in the scheme of the overall race, that could be key. But Jack Bartels has got the very rapid Stuart Mosley to pass over to. Also making excellent progress is Jamie Constable, who now moves clear of Ben Dimmock and up into 9th. So got a lot of quick drivers scything through the field. It's now the turn of Scott Mansell to be repassed by Jack Bartels. Mansell not quite as close to Scott Morgan on that occasion. And I just wonder whether Scott Mansell is almost doing the maths in his head, which says, over half a race, could I reel in 25 seconds on Nick Jones or not? It feels like in dry weather that is a very, very tall order.
Yeah, although as we've seen, he's been fantastically right. There we go. There's the pass. Yeah, oh no, Bartels can't quite make it stick on this occasion. Looks to the left on the pit path again, frustrated there as well.
Yeah. Now what Scott Mansell needs to be mindful of is that Jack Bartels will be able to get past the SR3 sooner or later as a bit of a moment for Nicolai Abo-Kansen. That's a quick spin. Also Marcello Maratteotto to the inside of Mark Hignett. Good pass that from Marcello.
That's right, yeah, ran Hignett out a little bit there, didn't leave him an option other than to run wide and said thank you, I'll take that place. But yeah, back here now, so Bartel has now taken the place from Mansell, who's closing up to the back of Mulvern. But I can see, I would think it would be prudent really in these circumstances, bearing in mind the championship stakes at this point for Malvern to really allow Bartels through and just concentrate on retaining the place from Mansell.
Yeah, Malvern instead actually defending into La Source, but it's only a matter of time because the power of the Spider is such that Bartels is able to pick his way past as they run downhill towards the bottom of the compression at Eau Rouge. They then flick uphill out of Radion. Now, Jack Bartels on that last lap, even with the overtaking, was a second quicker than Tim Berryman. Now, for the first time in clear air, we will see the true pace of Jack Bartels. How quickly he can come up to Jeremy Ferguson. Meanwhile, of the Enduro Championship runners, it is Mulvern from Mansell, then Harry Cockle, and Steve Burgess and Ricardo Dona next along. They are bisected by Jamie Constable, who is charging up through the order. Of the Sprint Championship runners, the order is Ben Dimmock from Paddy McLuhan and John McLeod. Great to see John going so well in 15th place and on for a sprint class podium.
Yeah, he's had a fairly quiet weekend so far with on his first visit to Spa-Francorchamps, but having a really good drive in this weekend. And of course, he's had success before in the longer distance races in the UK at Brands Hatch last year, picking up a podium. So yeah, he could present an upset here.
Meanwhile, Jamie Constable, well up inside the top 10. It's about to capture Harry Cockle, who is the third Supersport car. Now, it's interesting in terms of the etiquette being employed here by the Supersport runners. They're not making it difficult for the Spiders to go past, but at the same time, they're not prepared to compromise their racing lines, which feels like it's like the right balance, really.
Yeah, that's right, and I think with just a single event remaining at Brands Hatch next weekend, most of these drivers are now focusing on consolidating their championship position and giving themselves the best chance as they go into the final round next weekend. And he just doesn't even make the pass on Cockle there.
Here is our race leader, Tim Berryman. Berryman just reading off his 5th lap. We're 7.5 minutes away from the pit window opening. Berryman's lead over Ferguson is 12.9 seconds. His lead over Jack Bartels is 17.7 seconds. Now, that last lap, there was just a 1/10 of a second between Berryman and Bartels in terms of pace. And this could be very interesting as the action unfolds.
Yes, you do wonder how much Berryman has in reserve in the tank. And this, of course, is his first outing in the RXC Spider this weekend. Normally competes in the Radical Australia Cup and won last year in the SR8 class. So a very experienced Radical racer, but not necessarily in the RXC Spider. But he's obviously acquainted himself with it very well this weekend, and has really got to grips with what is a different handling car. A lot of drivers who've made the transition say it's much more like an SR3 in the way that it drives and the balance than the RXC, than the SR8, which is a more rearward weight bias car. You have to be a little bit more cautious in the way you apply the power.
Well, I think on behalf of all English cricket fans, it's nice to see at least an Australian having success in sporting competition in Europe this summer, as Tim Berryman is that margin he's got over Jaap Bartels is going to at least force Stuart Mosley to break out in a sweat, if not a little bit more, to try and chase it down. Here is Harry Cockle, who is third amongst the Enduro Championship runners, ahead of Steve Burgess. Now, this has been a spectacular weekend for Steve, but it has been a consistent one. He's racked up the points in every race.
Yes, he has, yeah, and he'll be looking to make it two championship wins on the trot. Of course, he was last year's Radical Clubman's Cup champion, making the transition into longer distance racing this season. So there's just a single race at Brands Hatch, a 90-minute Enduro, so there's really just one last chance after here to score points, and he's done what exactly he needed to. I don't think he's been entirely happy with how the cars felt underneath him this weekend, so yeah, a good solid batch of results, and that'll give him some momentum into Brands.
I think that's so often the way when you're pushing for a championship, that the key isn't the days when everything's going well and you romp off into the sunset. It's actually salvaging very good results in events where maybe you don't particularly get on well with the circuit. You've not quite got the car working as you wanted to. That's when the success starts to flow. And now Burgess beginning to close up onto the tail of Harry Cockle. Meanwhile, Jamie Constable to the inside of Scott Mansell. Constable should be able to pull clear en route towards the Lassour's hairpin. And again, on that last lap, Tim Berryman was only 0.3 of a second slower than Jaap Bartels.
Now, interestingly here as well, so Jamie Constable's just done a 22.6, which is a tenth faster than Bartels, and you could see that he was just in the fore of the shot there. So this leading pack of spiders are slowly starting to come together as we approach the mandatory pit window.
Already just over 15 minutes in, Tim Berryman leads from Jeremy Ferguson, Jaap Bartels, Scott Mulvern, Jamie Constable, Scott Mansell, Harry Cockle, Steve Burgess, Ricardo Dona and John Corbett. Ben Dimmock leads the sprint championship race from Paddy McGluhan, and that's a nice move from Jamie Constable past Scott Mulvern along the Kemmel Straight. Doesn't delay Mulvern in any way. But what we've seen on the last couple of laps is that Mulvern has been setting the fastest middle sector of any driver in the race consistently, which is what's helping him break away from Scott Mansell. But this time around behind Jamie Constable, that might be a bit trickier to achieve. Yeah, that's right. He'll be following pretty closely in the wake of the aerodynamics of the RXC Spider. But we've seen all weekend really that the SR3 has been able to challenge in that middle sector of both wet and dry races. And he's obviously just got it hooked up perfectly this weekend with the Kevin Mills Racing Squad. The other driver who is now on the march is Jesse Menzer. He's up into 12th place. He's just set the fastest first sector of anybody in the race. And Menzer, he's lost a little bit of ground. He's some 45 seconds off the lead, but now he's played himself in, is beginning to show the pace that we knew he had from qualifying, and could well be looking to challenge for a top 10 finish, certainly, maybe a little bit better than that if he can manage it.
Just see there's still a few damp patches around for anybody that's runs wide and offline onto that AstroTurf and the extra tarmac runoff. Then you know it could be something to catch the unwary. So these guys need to remain tidy. They've got to stay within the white lines where it's still pretty dry. And this is one of those circuits that can bite you. The proximity of grass, the edge of the track in many places means that small mistakes can sometimes yield a big penalty, and the trick is to know where you can really push and where you can't. Another fine lap from Jamie Constable, and interestingly Tim Berryman's pace just slipping last time through. He, for the first time in several kilometres, gave a second back to Jaap Bartels, so first to third now covered by 16.4 seconds. Jesse Menzer absolutely flying and almost sets the fast lap of the race. So 2 minutes 22.5 for Menzer. He's up into 10th place and is not by a huge margin, but he is closing in on the leading group. Meanwhile, talking of closing in, Scott Mulvern has been caught by Scott Mansell, and the pair of them are showing their best moves along the Kemmel Straight. Yeah, once again, Mulvern diving to the right hand side there to try and shake off Mansell, and it looks like he seems to have worked just for another lap for the second.
down towards the Bruxelles
Oh,
hairpin.
a bit wide there. You just saw momentary skip across the grass for Mansell.
Didn't seem to particularly delay him, did it? And again, this is sometimes where you see the difference between the professional drivers, is that they know which corners the AstroTurf gives them grip, and that they can't, they can afford to get away with overstepping the mark just a little bit. At the same time, both Malvern and Mansell setting a very, very formidable pace at the front of the field. They're now just shy of 8 seconds up on Harry Cockle. Meanwhile, Jesse Menzer in 10th has set another fastest first sector of the race, and it was almost a second faster than Tim Berryman through the same 40-odd seconds.
Yet again, though, it's Jamie Constable that's making the real big move here. Again, he's second in the intermediate part of the circuit. Again, he's another half a second or so faster than Berryman. This whole front four of Spiders are getting closer and closer by the minute.
And Scott Malvern has had yet another fantastic middle sector, the fastest middle sector of anybody in the race, and some 3 seconds through the middle sector, each that quicker for Scott Malvern than the Spiders ahead of him.
This is going to make for a very eccentric period, and I think it would be very wise of the KMR team to leave Malvern in the car as long as they possibly dare before passing him in. Getting him in to hand over to Jones.
Well, this is exactly why they would have engaged Scott Malvern in the first place. He's always been a driver who has exhibited absolutely fantastic pace. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, Jaap Bartels, I suspect, is just a little bit caught up behind Jeremy Ferguson. And so his capture of Tim Berryman has been halted. It means Jamie Constable is beginning to close up onto both of them as the pit window has now opened. Such has been the pace with which this race has gone by that the first 20 minutes have disappeared in the blink of an eye. And again, Scott Malvern defending from Scott Mansell. And it is a real treat, isn't it, to see two drivers right at the limit of what the car can do, pushing so hard.
And so closely matched as well. As you can see there, the lines are almost identical. There really is no margin, no margin between them in terms of the way that they drive the car. The driving style's very similar, and the lines that they're taking are almost identical. So, for one of them to make a move, it means that they're going to have to step outside the comfort zone for sure.
Yeah, I think you'd struggle to be seeing an SR3 going much quicker than a low 2 minute 25, which is where they're currently circulating. Maybe a hundredth or two to be found here or there, but otherwise there is very little in it. Still, Jeremy Ferguson is clear of Jaap Bartels in the fight for second and third. That's pretty even, but again, Jaap might come in quite early to hand over to Stuart Mosley. Should throw an interesting dynamic into the race. Here is Jamie Constable in fourth position. Now here is the battle for second and third between Ferguson and Bartels, and Jaap thinks about the move to the inside into the bus stop chicane, and he goes for it. Will he get the car stopped in time? Not really, but it's enough to do the job. Great stuff from Jaap Bartels. Jeremy Ferguson draws alongside him as the pair of them run side by side towards La Source. Jaap Bartels has got the track position. Does he have the right braking point?
Yeah, he just a couple of metres later into the entry. Oh, a big slide there, and managed to get it hooked up and back straight again. But I think a couple more metres later into the braking zone of the bus stop there, and he would have been right off onto the runoff. So he did a great job of hauling it up and over the rumble strip on the inside. And
now Jaap Bartels released into clear air once more, but they'll have gone past the pit open board on this occasion. So we might see Jaap Bartels duck in towards the pits fairly shortly. The shot gives you an indication of just the sheer scale of the Kemmel Straight as this battle for second and third turns into Les Combes. Almost at half race distance in this concluding race of the weekend for the Radical Sprint and Radical Enduro Championships.
I would think if I was Constable, I'd be fancying myself for the race win here, though, because he has only 45 seconds of success ballast, effectively, success seconds within the pit stop. The two drivers in front of him are both carrying 60 seconds, and Tim Berryman 70. So this is looking very, very good for Jamie Constable.
Are you suggesting that Constable's going to make sure that those success seconds are well policed?
I would almost certainly think so. We see the first stopper here, so this is Kim Burke in for his stop. Again, another one of the Radical Australia Cup contingent over in this combined championship this weekend.
And sporting a Mark Webber-esque helmet as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, in deference to his countrymen.
So we've got the first flurry of cars heading down into the pit lane. Jeremy Cottingham is amongst them to pass over to Michael Vergers. Also Nikolai Arbeg Hansen and Gary Patterson as well is the other driver. They roll to a halt. Just a couple of inspections of tyre pressure. So in is Mark Crader, and Mark was in about 21st place. So Michael Vergers jumps in to the SR3. Vergers such a pedigree with the Radical Mark.
Yeah, great to have the Flying Dutchman back on the grid again, of course, having held the Nürburgring production car lap record with Radical for many years with the SR8 and SR8 LM, but he's been out of Radical competition for a few years, and fantastic to have him back here.
Meanwhile, Scott Mansell has decided to have at least one more crack at Scott Malvern, as in is Jaap Bartels to hand over to Stuart Mosley. I think Stuart will be very, very proud of the way that Jaap has driven in the first half of the race.
Yeah, that's right, and you've seen a real attacking spirit there from Jaap. He's not taken any hesitation in taking opportunities and making opportunities to pass. So yeah, fantastic bit of racecraft from Jaap in the first half of this race.
And again, Scott Mansell carries a lot of momentum relative to Scott Malvern coming out of Radion. Now, what's been interesting is that Mansell seems quite content to drop back from Scott Malvern so as not to overuse the tyres and then renew his efforts again. Oh, and this time they play switcheroo, but there's no way through for Scott Mansell. I don't think there's anything untoward with that defence, just great racing between the pair of them. Head down towards the Bruxelles hairpin. Also in is Simon Holton and his SR3 RSX.
In the background there we see Stuart Mosley heading back out onto the track, so his charge will continue just shortly.
Well, what we're expecting is probably Scott Malvern to stay out until the last possible second of this pit window. Scott Mansell clearly, I think, is quite enjoying this pursuit of Malvern, because if he felt he was being slowed, he'd have ducked into the pits by now.
Now, interestingly, we're also getting an indication that Jamie Constable served his pit stop, so we'll see where they both emerge and the gap between himself and Stuart. And that may well be just about reachable for Stuart.
Yeah, Jamie Constable has emerged well clear of Stuart Mosley. And we will find out the gap between the pair of them at the end of this, the 11th lap of the race. Tim Berryman, our race leader, continues on in splendid isolation. In second place is Jeremy Ferguson. This is now the fight for third. It has remained the battle in the Radical Enduro Championship ever since the lights went out between Scott Malvern and Scott Mansell. And Mansell does indeed duck into the pits on this occasion. So Mansell heads into the pit lane, Scott Malvern continuing. And Scott Malvern has probably got time for 2 more laps, I would make it, with the pit window being open. Also in is Jeremy Ferguson to hand over to Andrew Ferguson. Again, they have, after disappointments in the first race yesterday, have had a reasonably solid weekend of racing.
There we see this is so now he's just got to sort of fight his way back through. As you say, we're finding drivers out of position now. So that's Ollie Hancock in from Mark Hignett, and of course they're again going to be fairly similarly paced. So it's going to be a little bit of a difficult period now for Malvern. He's got to be careful, because there will be traffic out there that, although it's out of position and further down, it's going to be a similar pace.
you know, on a scale of 1 to 10 of Ollie Hancock's enthusiasm to be passed by Scott Morvan, it's probably a -1, isn't it? But he decides to let him through. He doesn't. He decides to defend very early to Bruxelles, and around the outside goes Scott Morvan.
I think he realised that that wasn't a race that he was really involved with, and thought better of it at the last minute. But no, as you say, they're sort of great friends and very close rivals also. So
Scott Morvan in third position. Also change Marcello Maratotto out of the car. Michel Frey gets in. And it's wonderful this weekend to have seen Marcello back in action here at Spa after his incident last year, and to get through all the races, not only safely and in one piece, but also with some very competitive pace as well.
yeah, that's right. And yeah, it's no secret that he had a fairly hefty shunt here 12 months ago in his SR8 at Eau Rouge. So it's great to have him back here and sort of banish those demons. And 3 really good results would be fantastic for him moving into 2016.
Rolling into the pit lane now is Tim Berryman, the race leader. And he will just be hoping for a nice and smooth pit stop here. And I've been very, very impressed with the way that Tim has gone about his racing this weekend, because he has been steady and competitive in each and every race, but he's got quicker with each successive race as well. And now is potentially poised to challenge for victory here, except to say that his success in the preceding races means that he has got quite a lot of success seconds to overcome.
This 70-second pit stop's going to feel like it's going to feel agonisingly long for him. I'm sure he'll be biting his fingernails if he could take his gloves off. But yeah, he's done exactly what you need to do in radical long distance racing, and we've seen it so many times before in the European Masters. You know, it's all about controlling the pace and being able to dictate. You know when you can let off and hold consistent, when you really need to push and find something else in reserve. So he's done exactly what he needed to, and has had a stellar debut really for his first opportunity in an RXC Spider.
We just had a glimpse there of Jamie Constable, and here is Stuart Mosley. The gap between them is about 4.5 seconds at the end of the last lap, and this, by Will's pretty good maths and my extremely shaky maths, we anticipate is most likely going to be the fight for the lead of the race by the time the pit cycle has unfolded itself. So the gap between Constable and Mosley, 3.1 seconds. Stuart Mosley was substantially quicker, 1.8 seconds fast last time through. And emerging into the middle of the scrap is Tim Berryman. This is going to be a bit of a thriller over the last 20 minutes of this race, because in terms of pure pace, you would say that they are probably in ascending order at the moment.
You could tell that Berryman's been given the immediate hurry up there. That car didn't look particularly well settled through a Rouge, but he obviously knew he had to get up to speed quickly to stave off the advances of Mosley. So this is really exciting now. This is great stuff.
I can only assume the team said that his trip back to Australia would be freight if he doesn't bring the car home on the podium. And so he is picking up pace. This is the first time, and that was just the first occasion there that we've seen Berryman slightly out of his comfort zone this weekend. The first little twitch from the Spider. He's got Stuart Mosley bearing down his tail. Now, there is a school of thought which says defend like crazy from Mosley and hold on to that second place. There's another school of thought which says work together, towing Mosley up to Jamie Constable, and then the other alternative option is to actually allow Mosley through without too much difficulty and let Mosley do the hard work in trying to take on Constable first of all. Yeah,
you would suspect that his best option may well be, as you say, is if Mosley gets past him, is really just try and follow him best you can, and that'll give him the best opportunity to close up to Constable and ultimately take second rather than third. So, but yeah, it looks like he's having to really vigorously defend now from Mosley.
And Mosley's going to have a good run, coming either into Blanchimont or more likely towards the bus stop chicane. And Tim Berryman knows that he is there, and Mosley is absolutely poised underneath his rear spoiler.
Yeah, good line by Berryman there, though. He's defending his position well and really giving no option to Mosley. But we'll just see what happens here under braking again.
Well, Mosley had to back out of it. I think
it looks like he's just lost a couple of tenths.
He was a little bit too close through the high-speed turns, and the turbulent air possibly slowed him. But in terms of the battle here first to third, covered by 1.9 seconds. Meanwhile, amongst the Supersport runners, Nick Jones has taken over from Scott Morgan. That was the last of the cars that was pitting in, as we suspected it might be. So the roll downhill to Eau Rouge. And also, although he's not that far, Jesse Mensah has worked up into what's probably going to be fourth place once all the positions have been adjusted.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just got well, as you say, once he switches all the way through, and you would think probably that Nick Jones, who's currently at the top of the leaderboard on the timing screen at least, is going to be overthrown by Mensah. But no, a fantastic charge back through the field from the back of the grid, as we said at the start of the race.
And what Jesse Mensah could do with is this battle really slowing itself down. At the moment, Tim Berryman is showing absolutely no desire whatsoever to make this easy for Stuart Mosley. They've got a little bit of traffic immediately ahead of them in the form of Gary Patterson. They actually catch Patterson in quite an awkward stretch of track on the run towards Bouot. Almost presents an opening for Stuart Mosley, but not quite.
Yeah, might have just cost Mosley a slight tenth there, because he was sort of balked in the space behind Patterson. But no, both of them made it through cleanly and back on the way. It doesn't seem to have cost Constable. Of course, this is great news for Constable, because all the while this pair are scrapping, he takes the pressure off him, and he can just continue to lap and just keep them at a safe distance in his mirrors.
Yeah, what really Berryman and Mosley either need to have a tacit agreement to cease hostilities and see what they can do about chasing down Jamie Constable, or they need to sort out this battle one way or the other in the next lap or so. And Stuart Mosley decides that the run to Blanchimont might be the opportunity with which to challenge. Berryman tries to defend, but Mosley's going to go for it. Brave stuff from Stuart Mosley. He forces the inside of Tim Berryman as they head into Blanchimont. They're still side by side, and only now does Stuart Mosley get past. Brilliant driving from both of them. And that was a wonderful manoeuvre from Stuart Mosley.
I suspect what would normally be a confidence lift for Berryman there into Blanchimont became something more of a break when he realised he was running out of road. But yeah, fascinating wheel-to-wheel stuff there, and a great piece of driving from Mosley.
So the gap now from Jamie Constable, Stuart Mosley is 2.5 seconds. It went out by almost 7/10 of a second on that last lap. Amongst the Enduro runners, it's Nick Jones who leads that, from Steve Burgess, Ricardo Dona and Scott Mansell. So Mansell has been shuffled down to fourth place amongst the Enduro runners, but how much ground he can reclaim, we will find out.
Yeah, just 3/10 adrift from Ricardo Dona in front of him, so I suspect it's not going to take him too much longer to get back up into a podium position.
The other question is whether or not Jesse Mensah could snatch a podium, because last time around he was 4 seconds quicker than Tim Berryman.
The other one that we've sort of not noticed that's just quietly made his way back up through is John Corbett as well, who's up to 6th position in his SR8. So he's had a fairly quiet race, but is doing a fantastic job there, and is now holding 6th just behind Andrew Ferguson.
In the sprint championship race, it's Paddy McLuhan now who leads from Ben Dimmock, and it's still John McLeod who completes the sprint podium. Jamie Constable will, I'm sure, be well aware of the progress of Stuart Mosley.
Yeah, good last lap there from Constable. He was at 2:23, 6/10 there faster than Stuart. I suspect probably because Stuart was brought by the traffic, but it looks like he's a little bit closer on this lap, and in fact he's looking now to the left-hand side. Jamie covers his line.
So much pace carried through Pouon there by Stuart Mosley. He is asking all the right questions, Jamie Constable. There is a degree of, at what point does Mosley just pull the trigger and go for a surprise move, or does he?
I'm just wondering if he's going to perhaps try and make the same move as he did on the previous lap.
Is he close enough to challenge? Not quite. He needed to be the car length or so close from Jamie Constable. Is also well aware that is an opportunity for Mosley given the grip in these spiders, so he just covers the inside line for Blanchimont. That results in Constable maintaining an advantage. As they get in and amongst the traffic, that is only going to make things a little bit more complicated. They've got plenty of time left in this race as well to sort themselves out. It's Mark Crader.
Yeah, I think a change from position there as Michael Vergers fights his way up past Mark Crader there, yes.
Here come the leaders, and there is very, very little between them again. Heading downhill towards Roger Mosley, thinking about a brave one. Jamie Constable knows exactly where he is and is doing what he needs to do, which is sticking to the racing line, covering the inside line when he absolutely has to, but generally speaking, putting all the onus on Stuart Mosley to do the hard work. Tim Berryman remains there in third place, but the fast lap of the race has just been set by Jesse Menzer. Jesse Menzer, a 2 minutes 20.6, 4 seconds quicker than Jamie Constable at the front of the field. He's only 14 seconds back. Second place, if not better, is on here for Jesse Menzer.
Yeah, he's currently sitting 10 seconds behind Tim Berryman, and he's yeah, as you say, he's closing at some 4.5 seconds a lap. So within the next 2 laps, we're going to see him right on the tail of this train.
Swooping out of the left-hander on towards Pouot. Stuart Mosley, where he is much stronger than Jamie Constable, is these high-speed turns. That's where he's just got the commitment and confidence in the grip that's available to him. And again, he closes up on to Constable as they head towards Fagnes. It means that Jamie Constable puts his car squarely in the middle of the road. He's going to make Stuart Mosley look to the outside into Fagnes. Mosley can't get the overlap through that sequence of turns. Next challenge is going to be towards Stavelot. And again, you just wonder if Mosley's setting up for a bit of a run at it into Blanchimont. This time he's appreciably closer to Jamie Constable as they come through Stavelot, and Jamie Constable knows that he's a little bit caught here. He needs to not tighten the line too much into Blanchimont, because that way Mosley will go around the outside. At the same time, if he leaves a gap to the inside, Mosley will be through like a shot. And that was well played by Constable, perfectly positioned through Blanchimont, and Mosley thwarted for another lap.
Yeah, that's right. Again, just a confidence slip there, no braking at all, and Mosley was forced to brake, and that just cost him a couple of car lengths. But quite a late line there for Constable into. He was really forced to haul up the car before the bus stop.
He may have just got away with that, because it's a fairly short sprint towards La Source. Stuart Mosley sitting in right behind him, then ducks to the outside.
Will he look for the switchback? Yes, he does. Has he got alongside now? It's going to be a long... Oh!
Very close, but through goes Stuart Mosley. He takes the lead of the race. He finally forced Jamie Constable to overcommit to a defensive move as they both got their elbows out. Stuart Mosley through into the lead, and now doing all he can to streak away. Meanwhile, Jesse Menzer in fourth has just set another fast lap of 2 minutes 19.9 for Menzer, absolutely flying. And there is Menzer at the very tail end of the Kemmel Straight. So this could get very interesting, because depending on how quickly Mosley can shake off Jamie Constable and what sort of pace he can naturally run at, there is still just about enough time in the race for Jesse Menzer possibly to close up onto Stuart Mosley.
Yeah, and I'm just watching the car of Stuart Mosley there. It looks like he's just moving around a little bit more than they'd like. He is having to make some corrections on the exits from the corners. I'm just wondering if those rear tyres are possibly past their best.
Stop and go penalty for John Corbett for having an overly short pit stop, which would explain why he suddenly jumped up the order. In the Super Sport class, the Enduro Championship, Nick Jones leads that just by Steve Burgess. They're separated by 7/10 of a second. Scott Mansell is only 2 seconds back from that. And then it's Ricardo Doner in fourth. Romain Cockle, Paddy McLuhan leads the Sprint Championship from Ben Dimmock and John McLeod. So all of the races coming together extremely nicely as we come to the end of what's been an excellent weekend of competition from the Radical Sprint and Radical Enduro Championships.
Yeah, Stuart makes his just going to lap, just lap Burgess there. So yeah, it's looking pretty good for him at the moment, but there could be a sting on the tail if Menzer continues his charge. And it's very rare that we have a driver that's able to really challenge on pace Stuart Mosley.
Certainly is.
In a straighter fight as this, anyway.
Well, I think Stuart Mosley would very, very much like to score victory this weekend. And whether or not this is going to be the race, I think it possibly could be. He's certainly been able to build a little bit of a buffer over Jamie Constable already. Jesse Menzer is on to terms with Tim Berryman. Menzer at 2 minutes 20.6, and that was in heavy traffic. So the leading duo run downhill. There is Constable in second place. And Menza is only 8.3 seconds off the lead. That last lap from Stuart Mosley was a 2:23. Now, can Mosley pull the pin and accelerate onwards? We will look to the background to see whether or not Jesse Menza has found a way to navigate Tim Berryman. They were separated by just 7/10 of a second at the end of the lap. And I think he possibly has done, or is at least right alongside him. Stuart Mosley turns through Bruxelles hairpin and then flicks into the left-hander down towards Pouon. 6.5 minutes remaining. We're probably going to have time for 3 more laps. And yes, Jesse Menza is up ahead of Tim Berryman. So Menza goes third from the very, very back of the field. And Mosley is indeed opening up the pace just a little bit on this lap. But Menza was 1.1 seconds faster than Mosley through the first sector. It's this middle sector which is going to be absolutely key, I think, in determining whether or not we might just have a little bit of a twist in the plot. 63.8 from Mosley, 65.9 from Constable, and Jesse Menza a 65.2. Clearly he lost some time, I think, passing Berryman.
Not too much between Menza and Constable now, so Constable really is going to have to work with any traffic that he encounters over the next couple of laps. He's coming through to lap and try and use that to his advantage and just hope for a little bit of lady luck's on his side as well.
Through to the end of the 18th lap of the race for Stuart Mosley. His lead over Jamie Constable has grown, and there in the back of the picture is Jesse Menza. As Menza overcooked his tyres, possibly not, for the first time in several laps. Jesse Menza not any faster than Stuart Mosley. Slightly untidy lap, in fact, from the American. It's 8.6 seconds back. 3 laps to play with. 4.3 seconds to reel in on Jamie Constable. It is Tim Berryman in 4th. In terms of the Enduro Championship, it's all changed. Steve Burgess is leading it by fractions of a second from Scott Mansell and Nick Jones. That will probably have all changed around next time they cross the line.
Yeah, undoubtedly, and whilst they don't have the championship points to hand, I'm pretty sure that's going to leave us with a very, very close tie going into the final race at Brands Hatch next weekend. I think Steve Burgess, Mansell and Jones are all going to be within shouting distance of the championship, so it's going to make for a fascinating and thrilling finale.
Stuart Mosley heading towards Pouon. Scott Mansell does indeed now lead the Enduro Championship from Steve Burgess. And then it's going to be touch and go, whether it's Nick Jones or Ricardo Donor. It's Ricardo Donor in 3rd, Nick Jones in 4th. And Paddy McLuhan leads the Sprint Championship battle, as that is Elliot Goodman, who has been caught by Stuart Mosley. And this, I don't think will pose too many dramas for Stuart Mosley, except to say that he doesn't want to have too many slow laps in case Jesse Menza can find elevation of pace. And Menza has. Menza is 3 seconds up on Stuart Mosley through this lap alone.
I think Constable just made a mistake there and ran wide offline, so I think that might already be Menza's position as it is anyway.
Well, we will find out momentarily. In fact, Menza right behind Jamie Constable as they come towards the bus stop chicane. We just hold this shot now. We will see whether or not the order has changed. There is Menza looking to challenge Constable in the back of the picture. It's the white car of Jesse Menza running alongside Jamie Constable, and Menza crosses the line ahead of Constable and just 3.6 seconds back from Stuart Mosley as we head into the penultimate lap of the race. This is not done and dusted just yet. Although Menza and Constable were side by side coming out of La Source, it's not totally settled. Here we go, and yes, Menza now up ahead of Constable. This is absolutely fascinating. Jesse Menza is about to shoot his way past Elliot Goodman. 3.6 seconds over 2 laps, 14 kilometres of racing. And this would be victory from the very, very back of the grid for Jesse Menzer.
Yeah, it'd be frankly staggering results. He's had a difficult weekend in the damp, changeable conditions in the first 2 races. So this would be just desserts for him and a fantastic trophy to be going back to the US with.
I think that the only fair thing would be is if Radical laid on a private jet to take him home in the splendour of victory. No comment from Radical Sports Cars, as we have got Jamie Constable. It's still in a fairly solid third. Now Menzer was half a second up on Stuart Mosley through the first sector. It's this middle sector which is going to be giving us the key answers. Here is Mosley, the race leader, through Fania. Could really do. And here is a look at Menzer to the inside of Constable. Neither driver made it easy for the other. And then Menzer getting the switchback.
And here come the intermediates.
64.2.
Nothing at all really to separate the 2 drivers, just a tenth in that middle sector.
And you get the feeling possibly that Stuart Mosley's just dipped into his bag of tricks and said, I'm not having this. Although Mosley has got a little bit of traffic ahead of him. That is Ollie Hancock. Ollie, I'm sure, will see the blue flags waving, won't make this at all challenging for Stuart Mosley. I don't think Stuart will be too bothered by following Ollie through the bus stop chicane. It's not really going to delay him, but Menzer...
Looks Menzer's much closer this time. It has held him up a little bit.
Menzer has got a phenomenally rapid car through the faster sections of the track, and that, as we go into the final lap, has brought him to within 0.8 of a second of Stuart Mosley. This is going to be quite some run down the Kemmel Straight for the final time, isn't it? As Menzer moves out and picks his way around Ollie Hancock. And Stuart Mosley may be powerless to defend this one, as the pair of them reach the compression at the bottom of Eau Rouge, climb uphill and through Radion. They've got more traffic ahead of them in the form of Ed Cockle. And Mosley knows that Menzer's coming. He covers the inside line, and Jesse Menzer just pulls out of the slipstream. He draws alongside Stuart Mosley. Is it going to be a battle on the brakes? No, it's not, because Jesse Menzer is through into the lead of the race, but Mosley looks to fight back and swoops through and reclaims the lead. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the most tense half laps of racing that we've seen all season. So buckle up for some really exciting close racing here.
Stuart Mosley is going to now put together, I'm sure, an absolutely astonishing middle sector.
This is going to have to be absolutely inch perfect.
But I think for Jesse Menzer, there's an argument that his best chance came and went then, because he really would have needed to be ahead of Stuart Mosley coming out of the Kemmel Straight into Les Combes, because through Blanchimont, although it's a quick section of the track, you can start to throw a few defensive moves.
Yeah, the last chance he's got really is if he can get himself enough of a drive out of Stavelot, and as you say, on that initial momentum on the way to Blanchimont will hopefully maybe give him just enough in the tank that he can challenge under brakes into the bus stop.
We've had a couple of excellent races from the Radicals this weekend, but they have saved the best for last. And will Stuart Mosley be able to hold on through the last couple of kilometres of action? He swoops through Stavelot. Now Jesse Menzer, he's too far back now. Will he be able to carry that pace through Blanchimont? That could be nice tactical driving from Menzer if he can close on Stuart Mosley. He's not making Mosley drive defensively, but at the same time it means that Menzer can have exactly the line he wants. Now Jesse Menzer has got the run towards the bus stop chicane. Which side does Mosley pick? He picks the inside. Menzer looks to the outside. They both outbrake themselves and run wide, and it's then going to be the drag race to the line. Who can get the power down sooner? It is going to be victory for Stuart Mosley and Jaap Bartels, with Jesse Menzer just across the line in second place. A great last lap between them, and it's equally close for third, but it's Jamie Constable who just takes it from Tim Berryman. Just a tenth of a second between the pair of them. Absolutely brilliant finish.
Absolutely no quarter given there between Stuart and Jesse. No, a real last gaff braking in manoeuvre in there, and they were both forced, I guess, to avoid penalties to get back onto the racing line as quick as possible, and ultimately the superior traction there of Stuart just managed to pip him. But yeah, fantastic racing and a great end to the race weekend.
The rest of the field are all rolling through over the line now, waiting for our fifth place finisher. There he is, Andrew Ferguson. So Andrew and Jeremy Ferguson taking fifth. and then it's going to be Scott Mansell who will crown an absolutely emphatic weekend in the Radical Enduro Championship, who we are expecting to see home in 6th position. For Stuart Mosley, though, it is time to celebrate in parc ferme. He hops out of the cockpit. I think he will be... it was maybe a little bit harder on the last lap than you'd have wanted, but nonetheless...
I think it's certainly a good while, and there we go.
Yeah.
The deference to Justin Wilson, a very, very good friend of Stuart, and I know he's sorely missed, so yeah, that win will be for him.
Yeah, I think everybody would have hoped for Stuart to have scored a victory this weekend. A handshake and congratulations, Jesse Menzer and Stuart Mosley. I think enjoyed that on the last lap. It was Radical Racing its very best. It was close, but it was very, very clean as well. And Jamie Constable comes in to join the congratulations. Amongst the Supersport runners, Scott Mansell winning the Enduro race from Steve Burgess and Ricardo Dona, and the Sprint Championship race was won by Paddy McLuhan from Ben Dimmock and then John McLeod. Oh, fantastic racing from the Radicals this weekend here in Spa. They're next in action on the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit next weekend for their season deciders for the domestic championships, and then the Radical European Masters picks up in Monza, first weekend of October. So a look at the following results. Jaap Bartels and Stuart Mosley win it from Jesse Mensker and Jamie Constable. Tim Berryman in 4th, ahead of the Ferguson. Scott Mansell winning the Enduro Championship, and he was clear of Steve Burgess and Ricardo Dona, with Paddy McLuhan excellent 11th place en route to Sprint Championship honours. So a wonderful weekend of action from the Radicals. We will look forward to the closing stages of the Radical European Masters in Monza, and then at the circuit to Catalonia, where we'll be bringing you all of the action. So the gloom descending a little bit more as we'll take a look back at the highlights of the race. And off the line, it was Tim Berryman who converted pole position into the early advantage, as behind it got very, very close as they tiptoed their way through La Source. Fortunately, with no casualties, it was equally close by the time they arrived into Les Combes between Scott Mulvern and Scott Mansell. As Martin Verity unfortunately got it all wrong and thumped into the tyre wall. Well, the dry weather provided an excellent race, although Brian Caldwell and Ron Fletcher had a slight disagreement over the rights to the same piece of tarmac. Amongst the Supersports, Scott Mansell and Scott Mulvern produced an absolutely thrilling battle. Jaap Bartels raced his way through it, but then it all went a little bit wrong for Jaap Bartels. Around he went, and he had to do it all over again. Meanwhile, Jamie Constable was another driver who was steadily carving through from the tail of the field. Post pit stops, Stuart Mosley, taking over from Jaap Bartels, was able to find a way past Tim Berryman after a very brave move at Blanchimont, and that put him in a position to then line up Jamie Constable to take the lead of the race. All the while, behind Stuart Mosley, Jesse Menzer was chasing him down. So as Mosley took the lead, it was in the background the car of Menzer who was arguably causing the most timesheet concern. Brave move from Mosley. And as Menzer closed up at the final turn, it was Stuart Mosley and Jaap Bartels who took victory from Jesse Menzer and Jamie Constable, with Scott Mansell winning the Supersport race. Well, thank you very much for joining us for all of the coverage this weekend in Spa for the Radical Sprint and Radical Enduro Championships. We will see you in a few weeks' time as the Radical European Masters continue in Monza. Until then, from Will Brown and myself, Ben Evans, it's goodbye.